Joining us now, past NRA president and Washington Times opinion editor David Keene. Welcome to Cam & Company, Mr. Keene.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Good to
As
talk.
always.
Good to talk to you, sir. As always, you know. So David, you had this article, your opinion in the Washington Times about Operation Choke Point, and Andrew Langer is our expert on Operation Choke Point. So we have nothing to say on this topic. So we are going to let you, Andrew, do all the talking here because you two are the experts on Operation Choke Point when it comes to this.
Well, you know, a year or so ago, there started to be sort of anecdotal stories about in different industries, but particularly of concern to us was the firearms industry. Right. Pawn shops, firearms distributors. Remember there was on the internet the story of how Macmillan lost their bank accounts and all of this. And together, these people were saying that the government is doing this to us. But the government was denying it, and most people during that period were thinking, well, maybe these guys had some other problem. There was a gun distributor in North Carolina. We don't know all the facts. The banks aren't saying anything. The government doesn't say that they're doing this, so maybe we're being paranoid. As it turns out, we weren't paranoid. Or if we are paranoid, we can go by that old saying that even paranoids have enemies. Because the fact is that the Justice Department, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FBI, and others in the Obama administration had gotten together to run with an idea that a young assistant U.S. attorney in Philadelphia had come up with, which said that if they took business enterprises, businesses in sectors of the economy that they didn't like, there was a way to drive a lot of them out of business, and that was to make it impossible for them to have a bank or financial institution service their needs. If you're going to clear credit card payments, if you're going to do all these things, you need bank accounts. And as a result, they began meeting with bank owners, what are called third-party providers, and others in the financial services industry, and said, look, these are businesses, business sectors, everything from payday loans to home-based charities to firearms manufacturers, people that deal in tobacco products. These are what we call high-risk areas. And if you have depositors, if you're servicing clients within these industry areas, we can't tell you not to do that, but we're giving you a little bit of a warning that, in fact, you're putting yourself at risk. Because if it turns out somebody in that industry is committing fraud and you're providing any services to them, then it's reasonable for us to consider you an accessory to the fraud. And at the very least, if you have customers, if you have depositors, if you have account holders, if you're providing services to businesses in these sectors, you might expect, because they're such high-risk areas, that there'd be a greater scrutiny of what you're doing, and that the bank auditors would look more closely at your activities than they would at a competing bank who isn't servicing businesses of this kind.
Now, it's interesting, David, because and I'm glad you've written about this. It's funny, when I first brought up the issue of Operation Choke Point at CPAC this year to someone in the media, they looked at me like I was crazy. And because it sounds like crazy conspiracy theorizing, and thank God for the American Banker magazine, because they're the ones who really have broken a lot of the stories on this and helped pave the way for papers like the Washington Times to come out and talk a little bit more about it. I gave a presentation at a meeting last week in which I made the statement as we sort of looked down the road, and we've been talking on today's show about looking down the road at various overreaches by the federal government and how we need to be looking at this, what's passed as prologue. And, one of the statements that I've made is, assume for a moment that whatever political public policy arena you fight in. Let's say that you are the Competitive Enterprise Institute and you are tilting on the climate change issue. And the administration takes a position, as has been advocated by folks in the environmental movement, that to argue that climate change is not man-made is tantamount to fraud. What is to stop, if anything, a hostile administration to that position from using Operation Choke Point to shut off the bank accounts and the credit card payment processing of a CEI or a Heritage or an AEI of the world.
Well, see, they don't have and this is their defense, and this is what they're hiding behind. They don't have the power to tell a bank that they can't do business with a pawn shop, or they can't do business with Heritage, or they can't do business with the NRA. So what they're doing instead is saying to these banks, these are the kinds of high-risk operations that you ought to be careful of. Now, bankers, and this is the reason the bankers are most concerned about this, they live or die based on the audits that are undertaken against them. And if the government decides on a full-scale audit, basically closing them up for a period, they are in deep trouble. So the government is saying, we're just giving them a little warning. They know a threat when they hear one. And as a consequence, they respond by saying, maybe we shouldn't be servicing these guys, because why take the risk? And as you know, even businessmen who aren't in that kind of a regulatory environment, are risk-averse. So they cut it off. Now, the interesting thing, and Andrew, I'm sure you know this, is at the very time that the government was briefing the bankers on what they were doing, they were both publicly denying they were doing it and refusing to brief Congress. I mean, interestingly, this became an issue in the House because constituents were calling their congressmen and saying, we lost our banking relationship, and there's no reason. We've never missed a payment on anything. We've never had a problem. And all of a sudden, people started to take it seriously when it became more than just a few anecdotal reports, and members started asking. And then the government finally admitted it. But what the government's position, of course, is we're not really doing anything. We didn't need your authority to do it. We're just warning these people. And you're absolutely right. If you're in the White House, in the administration, the key here is these are all legitimate businesses.
Yes.
It is not, this is a society that was founded on the theory that you're innocent until proven guilty. You remember the old saying that it's better to let 100 guilty people go than to imprison or punish one innocent person.
Sure.
If there's somebody in, let's say, the payday lending industry or in any of these other industries that is, in fact, committing fraud, the government has all the power it needs to go after those
Absolutely
people.
True. That is an excellent point to make.
But what they're doing now is saying, it's hard to find these people. So if it's an industry in which there might be some of that, why not just close the whole industry? And we don't like these folks anyway.
It's hard to find the emails in that the IRS claims to have lost in this. It's hard to do a lot of these things with so you're saying essentially this is the laziness defense. We're too lazy to go after these guys,
right.
So we're going to simply make a blanket condemnation and let the chips fall where they may.
This is as it was put when they named it, that the choke point was the financial services industry, which would allow them, as they said, to choke off the air of business sectors that they find objectionable.
Yeah.
Now, that includes a lot of people that have a lot of problems with the government in general and with the Obama administration in particular. It also includes a lot of industries and a lot of business sectors that provide services to the poor. Now, you and I might not need a payday loan, but a lot of people do. And if they want to outlaw making such loans, that's one thing. You go to Congress, you do it. That's not what they've done. What they've done is they've said, we don't like this.
Yes.
And therefore, we're going to make it difficult for these industries to exist. They don't like smoking. They don't like tobacco, so why not make it difficult for tobacco retailers and distributors to do business?
And so down the
road,
they
don't like guns, so why not do the same thing to the firearms industry?
But on a side note, real quick, David, we're talking to David Keene, of course, NRA past president, and now opinion editor of the Washington Times. It's interesting as this choke point story has been developing, and we've been following it here very closely. We've also seen the rise of the acceptance of bank accounts for marijuana, pot dispensaries, and that industry. So if you're talking about, we don't like smoking, but all of a sudden...
That's a very interesting point, because the government is concerned that in Colorado, a lot of banks don't want to do business with the marijuana people. Now, they're a favored industry. So the feds are looking at ways to actually convince the banks there that they ought to be doing business with manufacturers, distributors, and retailers of marijuana products, while at the same time, the disfavored industries like guns and the like, they are trying to find ways to prohibit.
But it just seems like there's a cognitive dissonance there when you're talking about, hey, we don't like smoking, we don't like tobacco products, but and this is not I'm not taking a position on marijuana. I'm just talking about as a business, which is now legal in Colorado and Washington. If you really don't like smoking and you don't like tobacco products, why are you making it so much easier for marijuana dispensaries to become banking customers when you're trying to get smoke shops and other places?
Well, that assumes that these folks and the policies they develop are logical rather than ideological.
I'm sorry,
and whether
David,
or not they
you're
turn
right,
around
sir. I'm sorry, sorry.
That is Cameron raises the point, because this is what I keep saying to folks: you can hate guns and love legalized pot, and this should be of concern to you. You could hate porn, but love payday lending, and this should be of concern to you. There is something in this. This is where left and right can come together. It's actually one of the great things that buoyed me was when you had members, Democratic members of the House, express deep concern over the closing of check cashing businesses in inner cities, because they have vast numbers of people who are unbanked and underbanked in those areas.
No, that's exactly right.
All right, David Keene, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for your time.
For coming
Always
on.
a pleasure.